Have you ever let someone touch a part of you thought had gone numb? Not your skin, something deeper, something even you stopped checking for signs of life. This is the story of what happens when someone dares to reach there and stays. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Thanks so much for watching. The hospital hummed with its usual Thursday rhythm, monitors beeping in irregular sync, shoes scuffing along linoleum, and the distinct rustle of paper gowns being adjusted in haste. Brenda liked the quiet chaos of mornings like this. It was the middle ground before real emergencies started piling in. Or at least, she used to like it. Now it all blended into a blur of routines and dull repetition. She pressed her ID against the door scanner and walked into the nurse's station with a travel mug half full of stale coffee. The kind her husband brewed, then left to sit. She sipped it anyway. "Room 412's dressing needs changing again," someone called out. Brenda raised a hand in acknowledgement, already heading toward the cabinet for gauze and saline. Then she heard the laugh, clear, short, warm, and something in her posture shifted. Natasha was already ahead of her, crouched by the side of an elderly patient's bed. The old man was grinning like he'd just won something. Natasha was adjusting his blanket and telling him a story about her neighbor's dog stealing mail. And the thing just bolts, mail flapping out of its mouth like it's proud, she said, her voice low but animated. "I swear, it's plotting to take over the entire block." The patient chuckled, wheezing a little. "I'd give it my bills if it wants 'em." "I'll let it know," Natasha replied, tucking the sheet neatly over his chest. She stood, offering him a wink. "But only if you promise not to charm the whole ward while I'm gone." Brenda stopped near the doorway, watching. The man reached for Natasha's wrist, patting it once. "You're a good one, girl. I always feel better when you're around." Natasha's expression softened, and she gave a small nod before turning to leave. When she noticed Brenda, her lips curled just slightly, not into a full smile, just enough. Brenda looked away. In another life, she might have smiled back. The shift moved like molasses. Brenda floated between rooms, checking vitals, filling forms, changing lines. Everything mechanical. A nurse 2 years ago had described her as iron-willed. She wondered if that nurse would recognize her now, quieter, thinner around the eyes, always cold. "Hey, Brenda," Natasha said later, breezing into the break room. Brenda didn't answer at first. She was pretending to scroll through her phone, though she wasn't seeing the screen. Her fingers hovered above a half-solved Sudoku. Natasha grabbed a yogurt from the fridge, peeled it open, and perched on the opposite counter, kicking her sneaker softly against the cabinet. "How's the royal husband?" she asked casually, spoon halfway to her mouth. Brenda blinked. "Busy," she replied. "Meetings, fundraisers, pretending not to notice I don't come home until 10. Natasha didn't respond right away. She stirred the yogurt with the back of her spoon, eyes steady. "You ever think about taking a weekend off?" "I'm a nurse, Natasha," Brenda said flatly. "We don't get weekends." Natasha smiled with one corner of her mouth. "We don't take them. Not the same thing." And there was always something mildly dangerous in the way Natasha spoke. Never outright provocative, but like every sentence could unlace you if you let it. Brenda wasn't in the mood for games, but part of her also didn't want to be left alone in her fog. Natasha had a way of pulling people toward her without touching them. "Anyway," Natasha continued, jumping down from the counter, "I've got Mr. Alvarez in 417, wants me to write him a hall pass so he can flirt with the speech therapist." Brenda's lips twitched. "She's 30. Age is just an illusion when you're 80 and charming." Natasha dropped the yogurt cup into the trash and walked past Brenda. As she did, her hand briefly, almost incidentally, brushed Brenda's arm. Bare skin to bare skin. a warm stripe across the cool slope of Brenda's forearm. It wasn't an accident. Brenda knew that immediately. She didn't move, just kept staring at the Sudoku screen, though now her breath had caught in her chest. Late afternoon brought a surge of admissions, minor strokes, a post-op complication, a combative dementia patient. Brenda and Natasha were paired up on wound care, which meant a 2-hour block of bandages, charting, and patients who rarely said thank you. In room 309, the patient winced as Natasha peeled off a dressing. "Sorry, sir," she said gently, eyes focused. "This one stuck to your skin like a jealous ex." The man barked a laugh, then winced again. Brenda handled the paperwork in silence. "You know," Natasha said afterward as they wheeled the supplies down the corridor, "when we started working together, I used to think you were cold." Brenda turned her head slightly. "Used to? I figured it out," Natasha continued. "You're not cold. You're just done pretending." Brenda stopped walking. She didn't speak. Natasha turned to face her, one hand still on the supply cart, thumb hooked into the strap of her scrubs. Brenda looked at her for a long moment. Natasha's hair was tucked behind one ear, short, dyed pale pink over what had once been a light blonde, roots showing just enough to seem intentional. Her eyes were sharp, but never harsh. Patients adored her because she gave them all her attention, never flinched, never rushed unless someone needed her to. And she loved the job. That much was clear. It lived in her posture, in the ease with which she moved through the chaos. Watching her reminded Brenda of who she used to be. "You think you've got me figured out?" Brenda asked quietly. "No," Natasha shrugged. "But I pay attention." Brenda nodded once, slow. "Don't." Natasha didn't answer. She stepped closer, close enough for Brenda to smell the faint citrus of her soap. Their bodies didn't touch, but Brenda could feel heat radiating across the gap. Then, Natasha leaned in. Not kissing, not daring, but just close enough that her lips hovered beside Brenda's cheekbone. Her breath warmed the skin there, and Brenda didn't step back. "I'll stop," Natasha whispered, "when you want me to." She walked away. Brenda stood in the hallway, the cart forgotten, the clipboard loose in her hand. That night, long after her shift had ended, Brenda's phone lit up on her nightstand with a message. "Can I see you outside of work? Just once." She didn't answer, but she didn't delete it either. They didn't talk about the hallway moment, not directly. Brenda resumed her usual shift patterns, always a few minutes early, always organized, always tired. Natasha, meanwhile, moved through the hospital like she always had, brisk but present, occasionally late but never scattered, and always leaving patients in better spirits than she found them. It was a Friday when things began to shift again. A light rain tapped the windows, and Brenda had barely slept. Her husband hadn't come home the night before. He'd claimed it was a late board dinner. She didn't ask for proof. She was reviewing a medication chart at the station when Natasha approached, carrying 2 paper cups. "You looked like you might need something warm," she said, holding one out. Brenda hesitated, then accepted. "What is it?" "Not terrible," Natasha replied with a grin. Brenda sipped. It wasn't terrible. They stood in companionable silence, the type that could easily be mistaken for familiarity or something softer. Around them, machines beeped. A stretcher rolled past. Someone paged radiology. And still, they didn't move. "You didn't message back," Natasha said eventually. Brenda turned slightly toward her. "I didn't know what to say." "You didn't have to say anything. No works just fine." "I didn't say no." "No," Natasha agreed, lifting her cup to her lips. "You didn't." The next few days settled into an almost pattern. Natasha would linger a second longer than necessary when handing over reports. Brenda would pretend not to glance at her across the ward. Neither acknowledged what simmered just beneath the surface. But it colored everything now. The air felt different when they shared it. It was during an IV insertion that Brenda cracked. A new patient, mid-30s, post-op, was nervous, fidgeting, asking too many questions. Brenda couldn't get the vein. Her hands weren't steady. "Mind if I try?" Natasha asked gently, already donning gloves. Brenda stepped aside. Natasha crouched next to the bed, her tone casual. "All right, we're going to breathe in on 3. You with me?" The patient nodded. 1, 2. On 3, the needle slid in cleanly. "You're magic," the patient said, exhaling. Natasha smiled, taping the line down with practiced ease. "I've been told." Brenda watched her, something turning slowly in her stomach. Natasha loved the job. She made space for people. She handled even the anxious ones without flinching, never rushing, never condescending. Brenda used to be like that, used to care so much it kept her up at night. Now she couldn't remember the last time she'd felt anything at all on the floor except exhaustion. After they left the room, Natasha didn't gloat. She didn't say anything. She just handed Brenda the chart and walked beside her until they reached the elevator. When the doors slid closed, Brenda finally spoke. "I'm not weak." Natasha looked at her. "I never said you were." "But you think it." "No," Natasha replied. "I think you're tired. There's a difference." Brenda stared ahead at her own reflection in the elevator doors. The overhead lights made her look older than she felt, washed out, outlined in fatigue. Natasha, standing just behind her, was a contrast in every way. Compact, clear-eyed, present. "Do you want to sit down?" Natasha asked quietly. "What?" "Just come with me. 10 minutes. You can say no." Brenda hesitated. Then she nodded. The on-call room smelled like hand sanitizer and a hint of citrus cleaner. The cot against the wall was neatly made, the blanket folded military style. Natasha didn't touch it. Instead, she sat on the floor, back against the wall, legs stretched out. She patted the tile next to her. Brenda rolled her eyes, but lowered herself anyway. Her knees clicked on the way down. They sat in silence for a while. Not the awkward kind, just quiet. Outside the door, the hospital pulsed with its usual rhythm. But in here, it was still. Brenda sipped the last of the lukewarm drink Natasha had brought her earlier. "You don't even know me," she said eventually. Natasha turned her head. "I know enough." "Like what?" "That you hate being touched unless you're in control of it. That you chart faster than anyone on this floor. That you breathe through your mouth when you're trying not to cry. And that you haven't had a good night's sleep in weeks." Brenda stared at her. "I also know," Natasha continued, her voice low but steady, "that your husband talks to the residents like he's still trying to win a campaign. And you used to love this job. You used to light up every time a patient improved. Now, you look like you're just trying to survive the day." The words weren't cruel. They weren't even pitying. They were just true. Brenda closed her eyes for a second. "I don't want to be a cliché," she whispered. "You're not," Natasha said. "You're just someone who stopped asking for more." They sat like that until the overhead speaker buzzed an announcement. Neither moved. Then Natasha leaned in, not fast, not bold, just slow enough to be deliberate. She didn't touch Brenda's face, just hovered. Close enough for breath to meet breath. Brenda didn't back away. Their lips met softly. No rush, no hunger. Just pressure and quiet understanding. Natasha's hand found Brenda's arm, her fingers curling gently above the elbow. Brenda tilted her head, deepening the kiss just slightly, and then, just as quickly, pulled back. They both inhaled. Brenda looked down at the floor. "That can't happen again." Natasha nodded, not moving. "Okay." But her hand remained on Brenda's arm for a second longer than it needed to. When it slipped away, Brenda felt its absence like a drop in temperature. Later that night, back at home, Brenda stood in her kitchen, staring at the pot of rice she'd forgotten was on the stove. Her husband walked in, phone pressed to his ear. He gave her a distracted nod and kept walking. The smell of something beginning to burn pulled her back. She turned off the burner, dumped the pot in the sink, and stood very still. 10 minutes passed before she moved again, just long enough for the warmth from Natasha's fingers to finally fade from her skin. Word spread faster than Brenda expected. No one said anything directly, but something shifted. Conversations paused when she entered the break room. The intern who used to greet her every morning avoided eye contact. Even the patients seemed to look at her differently, warier, like they'd caught the scent of scandal. She knew where it started. A whisper passed from a respiratory tech to a radiology nurse. A nurse passed it to admin. Admin connected dots. Her husband wasn't the kind of man who handled rumors quietly. The explosion came on a Sunday night. He was already home when she walked through the door, his coat off, his phone face down on the table, a half-finished glass of scotch sweating onto a napkin. He didn't stand when she entered. "You've humiliated me." Brenda didn't speak. "She's a junior nurse," he snapped. "And a woman, for Christ's sake." Still, she said nothing. She'd imagined this moment 1,000 ways. Tears, denial, apologies. But now that it was here, all she could do was stare at the man she'd once wanted to grow old beside and feel absolutely nothing. "I've given you everything," he said, rising slowly. "Do you know what people are saying?" Brenda finally met his eyes. "Do you care what they're saying, or that you didn't hear it from me first?" He flinched. For the first time in months, something genuine flickered across his face. It wasn't anger, it was fear. She set her bag down quietly. "I'm sleeping in the spare room," she said. "Don't follow me." He didn't. At the hospital, things didn't get better. She wasn't pulled into HR. But her name lingered on everyone's tongue in silence. Natasha was reassigned to pediatrics for a few days. Probably not punishment, but it felt like separation. Brenda floated through the week like someone working from underwater. Everything muffled, everything heavy. On Thursday, after finishing her rounds, she walked past the pediatric wing. She didn't mean to stop, but there was a sound, a laugh she hadn't heard all week. Natasha's. Brenda paused in the doorway. Natasha knelt beside a boy who couldn't have been more than 7. He wore a tiny surgical mask and held a dinosaur, plush like it was sacred. Natasha was pretending to check the dinosaur's vitals. "Looks stable," she said gravely. "But I recommend snacks and cartoons immediately." The boy gave her a tired thumbs up. Brenda's throat tightened. She turned and walked away. That evening, she found Natasha in the staff lounge, curled on the floor again, leaning against her duffel bag, eating trail mix with surgical gloves still peeking out of her scrub's pocket. Brenda shut the door. Natasha didn't look up. "You okay?" "No." There was a beat. Then Natasha patted the floor beside her. Brenda sat down. "I think I broke something," Brenda said. "Whatever was left." Natasha's voice was quiet. "Marriage?" "Maybe, or maybe it was already cracked, and I just stopped pretending I could tape it together." She looked at her hands. "I used to love this place, the job, the chaos, all of it. Now I just feel tired." Natasha didn't reply, but she shifted a little closer, close enough for their knees to touch. Brenda turned toward her. Do you regret it? Natasha held her gaze. No. I'd do it again. Brenda leaned forward first this time. Their kiss was different now. No longer testing. It was deliberate, unrushed, a kind of exhale. Natasha cupped the side of Brenda's face, her thumb brushing over a cheekbone, and Brenda leaned into it like someone remembering warmth. When they broke apart, Natasha pressed her forehead to Brenda's for a second. You're shaking, she whispered. I know. They didn't go to her house. Too many memories, too many ghosts in polished shoes. Instead, they ended up in a small hotel on the edge of town, clean, anonymous, quiet. The kind of place people didn't ask questions if you arrived at 11 p.m. with tired eyes and nothing but a shoulder bag. Brenda sat on the bed, shoes still on, staring at the TV remote. Natasha moved slower here. She didn't rush. She knelt in front of her and untied her shoes. One, then the other. Fingers gentle, eyes unreadable. Brenda's breathing hitched as Natasha slid her socks off, smoothing her thumb over her ankle. That one small movement undid her. Her hand reached down instinctively, resting on Natasha's shoulder, fingers curling slightly. I don't know how to do this, Brenda said. Then don't, Natasha replied. Just be here. She stood and kissed her again, longer this time, hands cradling Brenda's jaw. Brenda's arms wrapped around her back slowly, cautiously, as if she didn't trust her own body to behave. They undressed without hurry. There was nothing performative about it. No mirrors, no games. Just clothing dropped one piece at a time. Soft sheets pulled back, bodies meeting in quiet, tentative patterns. Every movement was a question. Every answer was yes. When they lay back, Brenda traced the inside of Natasha's wrist with her fingertip. Natasha's breath caught, just a little. Her palm opened wider. Brenda moved closer, chest to chest, and whispered, I forgot what this was supposed to feel like. Natasha kissed her collarbone once. Then start over. 2 weeks later, the gossip had cooled. People found new stories, new scandals. The whispers faded. The nurses who mattered never judged her. The ones who did kept their distance. Brenda filed separation paperwork. Her husband didn't fight her on it. He just handed her a pen. She moved into a 2-bedroom apartment 3 blocks from the hospital. One morning, Natasha showed up at her door with 2 coffees, one regular, one decaf, and a reusable bag full of overpriced croissants. They didn't kiss in the doorway. They didn't need to. They sat on the balcony, feet up on a crate, sipping quietly. Brenda watched the sky lighten behind the city buildings. I'm scared, she said finally. Natasha bumped her foot gently. So am I. Brenda turned her head. You're not scared of anything. Natasha gave a half smile. You're not looking closely. Brenda leaned back in her chair, tilting her face toward the rising sun. Her hand reached out without thinking, brushing the side of Natasha's thigh. Do we tell people? We don't owe them anything, Natasha said. We just show up. Together. That's enough. Brenda nodded slowly. In the distance, a siren wailed. Shift change was coming, but for now they stayed in their chairs, their knees touching, and the morning quiet between them. No promises, no grand declarations. Just one moment, steady and new.